Let's get started here. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the conversation today, which will be 5 simple steps to protecting your business data. And we're going to explore what companies need to do in order to keep their organization safe and secure. My name is Rob Schenk with Intelligent Technical Solutions. Here at ITS, we help and specialize in helping small and medium-sized businesses thrive by managing and securing their technology. A few housekeeping notes as we get into the conversation. The conversation is going to run about 30 minutes or 35 minutes or so, and we're going to stick around for some questions at the end. The conversation will be recorded. So if there's any information you'd like to review afterwards, you can go ahead and take a look at that. We'll go ahead and send the recording out afterwards. And then we'll also be, you can just go ahead and share that with other colleagues in your environment. So happy to take questions. You're going to see a Q&A box in your Zoom toolbar there. So please go ahead and please submit your questions. We're going to go ahead and have some time at the end for some Q&A. So without further ado, let's get this party started here. You're going to notice a QR code in the lower right corner, and that's going to lead to a special offer for attendees of the webinar. If you happen to need to leave a little bit early or something, you might just take like a scan of that, and then make sure you go ahead and take that. So for today's discussion, I'd like to welcome our very special guest, Jim Lowry. He's a senior systems engineer with over 18 years of experience in IT, specializing kind of infrastructure performance, data protection, compliance, and business continuity planning. He's been at Veeam since 2018. It focuses on cloud and data protection strategies. He's got a BS in information technology from Brigham Young and an MBA from East Carolina University. Jim, pleasure to see you, and thanks for joining.
Great to be here, Rob. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate. This will be a really great discussion.
All right, perfect. Let's get started here. So we're going to brief agenda over here. So we're going to first talk about what is the current landscape, what are trends that we're seeing that's affecting data protection. We'll dive into some best practices recommendations that we can all kind of take through. Like we're going to talk through the importance of kind of people, process, and technology, and then we'll talk through some next steps that business leaders need to action to best protect their company's data. So you can, in order to protect yourself, you need to be aware. And so we want to review what it takes to be avoiding, how do we avoid becoming a victim? And then we'll dive into some Q&A at the end. So without further ado, let's get the party started. So Jim, let's talk about the current landscape. I know what are some of the current trends that you're seeing around data protection strategies?
Well, that's a great question. Ransomware is a big deal, right? We see so many different areas and businesses that get attacked, and ransomware is one of the biggest. And the first thing they do is go after your backups, right? If you can encrypt backups or take over backups, then you can control a lot of how that outcome can go. Another really big thing we're talking about here, and I think I'll let you introduce the data explosion piece of that because it's kind of interesting. Um, but people can't afford to be ignorant anymore, right? You need to understand what's going around you. And with that, you need to understand that there are strategies and principles that work at a generalized layer, but there are also account for specialties and specialization within each of these different categories that we'll cover today. But the biggest thing I think to take away from all of this is that there is no one single thing that can protect you and make your data and your business fully resilient in the event of any type of disaster, ransomware or breach of data or disaster from a meteor crashing your data center. You have to take a multifaceted approach to be able to do a truly resilient model of business continuity.
So looking at the data explosion there, I see ZB,
Yeah.
zettabytes.
Yeah.
So I've heard megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes,
Yeah. What
petabytes. So what
is a zettabyte? Yeah.
what's a zettabyte? How are you like what is that?
Yeah. So this is not, Doc Brown's 1.21 gigawatts. This is a lot of zeros. So to kind of put it into perspective, last year 150 zettabytes were created just last year in data. What is that, right? That's 10 raised to the 21st power. So 21 zeros, right? With the one after that. Another way to look at it, it's a million 48,576 petabytes, right? So you're doing millions of petabytes you're talking about here. And in this case, you're talking about with 150 plus zettabytes, 150 million petabytes of data generated just last year. It's astounding. Like you can't count, how do you count that high?
We got to protect it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what's so it is data is the new oil. It's the new gold. Everything that you're doing now in the AI landscape and business continuity planning, revenue generation is all going to be want to use your data to do better, to improve, and to, frankly, make more money. How do you
Yeah.
be more efficient?
All right. So moving on here, we have some best practices that we want to talk through. So it looks like we've identified about 5 best practices. So we're going to kind of go through each one kind of individually, give a quick overview. So you want to start going through that? What's the first one here?
Yes, awesome. So the very first one here um, is, and I apologize, Rob, I can't see the PowerPoint from my particular view here, but I can see it here on my side. I have it open on my side, so I'll track it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. So we're on
Um,
the incident response plans.
right. So the first thing to take into consideration here is incident response readiness. You need to be ready to understand what types of disasters could happen and how to mitigate for them, right? The second big thing that will focus on is active backup and recovery strategies. What are the different methodologies you need to have in place to make sure that everything is available when you need it? Third message, proactive security measures. What can I do now to prevent events in the future from happening? How do I mitigate the risk? Fourth would be investment in detection and resilience. Like, what are the tools I need in place and why do I need them? What does the cost get justified to add these things? And then lastly is security awareness and training for your entire install base, right? I'm not install base, but your entire company employees, right? Ah, awesome. I can see the slide. Thank you. So having those 4, 5 pillars applies to every organization out there. The first one we can dive onto here is making sure we have a robust incident response plan. So, Rob, when you hear that, what does that kind of resonate to you? When you hear about incident response plan, what comes to mind for you on that? What would it be?
Well, I think what I end up seeing is that a lot of companies don't have them.
Yes,
So that's number
absolutely.
one, right? So, incident response plan. Okay, what is that? Let's just define it. So it's basically going to be the steps and the procedures that a company is going to follow if they have had a worst case cyber event.
Hmm.
And one of the things that we see a lot is for the folks that do have them, so companies that are a bit more on the proactive side are going to have these best practices laid out. It's going to contain who am I going to contact? I'm going to talk to, and it includes all the kind of relevant information, cell phones, et cetera, of your legal counsel, your
Hmm.
insurance provider, your IT provider, and I want to basically, hey, who do I talk to as quickly as possible as soon as an event occurs? And then
Right.
what we often see sometimes is that folks haven't actually printed out the thing, and so what ends up happening is like, hey, I got an instant response plan. I have a cyber incident. My company has just been ransomwared. I can't get into my file server and related documents. Oh, by the way, my instant response plan was on there. But having a physical printout of the thing handy for all the relevant leadership members and so forth is a very basic practical step, but a lot of people don't do that.
Right.
So when the thing happens, it becomes a big problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot of the people will stop with incident response plan at the idea of here's what I need to do to perform a backup or a restore operation. Or if you're using, replication, how do I fail over that data center? And they forget the piece that you need here that's critical. You need to make these run books, these examples, these tests so detailed in your incident response plan books that a caveman can do it. Because some things that don't get prepared for are employees leaving, and so tribal knowledge goes out with them, right? Or when a CEO changes or leaves, what's the impact on the plan there? They also have to know who has the right to do specific privileges, right? Who is in charge of kicking off the information? And we'll dovetail a little bit more into that specifically in the next topic. But it's critical.
So let's
I
talk
love,
about
yeah,
recovery from ransomware. So that's a complicated topic as well. It's not an easy thing, is it?
no, no. And I love this chart because if you look at it, you're seeing, okay, 1 to 2 weeks is the largest people it takes the time to respond is to restore, get everything back up and running after ransomware is about 1 to 2 weeks, right? So that's 30%. Okay, well, we can live within 1 to 2 weeks. But another way to look at this is that 4% bucket there on the left, only 4% of the ransomware recoveries were able to be done in less than a week. Think about that. 96% of all ransomware attack recoveries go at least 7 days long before you're able to recover. That's astounding. That's a huge amount of time. And you need to understand that part of these response plans is to understand not just the risk and the steps to do it, but how long and how quick can I get it done? What's the impact to me? If my business is off for an entire week, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right?
And let's look at the other side of the spectrum here. You have 1 to 2 months, 2 to 4 months. That's what, 20%?
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of those companies are just going out of business.
Yes,
We're
absolutely.
seeing like, was it? I think it's like a very large percentage of businesses that are going over a couple of weeks. They just can't sustain that, and then they're going out. They're going under.
Yeah. 21% of people here are taking at least 1 month. That's 1 in 5. 1 in 5 businesses go on without a month. So the risk here and the risk to impact is significant, and you need to be prepared for it, which is why I go back to that screenshot. Your run book and response plans need to be so easy that a caveman can do it. Assume that somebody who's never worked there before on day one of employment could come in there and follow that run book and get everything done.
Yeah. So let's talk about what is an appropriate backup and recovery strategy look like?
Great question. Great question. So this is where it kind of dovetails nicely from where we were before, right? So we want the ability to define specific pieces because every application and every business is going to do things differently. For some companies, your online transaction database for your web store, you can't afford any downtime on that because then you're literally losing money, losing orders. So that's going to have a very different retention plan and responsibility reaction plan using things like RTO and RPO, recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives that are clearly defined make a big difference. So,
So you can just go on. Just can you explain those a little bit more for folks that
exactly.
might be familiar with that? So like, what does that mean exactly?
Great question. So RTO, recovery time objective, is what's the maximum amount of time I can be down before businesses or this application gets severely impacted, right? How long does it take me to recover something? So an OLTP database in your web store, that's you're talking seconds, right? You can't afford to be down less than seconds for a year, or you can significantly lose revenue from processing orders. They'll go somewhere else. RPO is how far back in time do I need the ability to recover from? So if it's a file share, maybe I only need to take a backup once a day because if I have to roll back to something that was yesterday, that really doesn't impact anything in our operation, right? So it's very different spectrum. And you need to apply both these RTO and RPO to every system that you would need to run, especially your crown jewels. Always start with the most critical and then anything that ties into it. It's not just your database server. Is it Active Directory, DNS, file shares that run with it, any web servers that are dependent upon that application? Everything needs to be included inside those response plans and know how to recover.
So you got some other stuff that's listed there. We're going to talk through those a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about kind of the SLAs or service level agreements, which is what you're contracted to be able to provide. Another one, we'll dive into this here in just a second. So 32110 rule. And that one's really, really important. We'll spend a little time on that one. Another thing to keep in mind here is the ability to do automation and orchestrated workloads for not only just backups, but recoveries. How can I remove the risk of human error? What can I do to make sure that this plan is tested and running and works all the time? And I have all of the right RTOs, RPOs in place. And this is one of my personal favorites of this deck here, is this slide here. The entire purpose of a backup recovery strategy is to avoid doing the Spider-Man model of accountability. Who's in charge? Who has the authority to do what actions? And how often am I updating those to make sure that it's current? Because if somebody leaves and takes that tribal knowledge with them, do you have a way to account for that in your recovery strategy, right? But you also want to follow role-based access controls, right? So you need to make sure that you have the appropriate settings deployed everywhere and who will be held responsible in order to act so that people don't have to wait and point fingers to the, well, that was Johnny's, not Susie's problem.
Right.
So waited for them to fix it.
So let's talk through some orchestrated readiness and recovery. So what are some best practices that a company should be thinking about here?
Yeah, that's another very core topic here. Orchestration is something, again, going back to how do I mitigate human error? With Veeam and our software suite and recovery, I have the ability to automate pretty much anything you want to do. And we full open API integration, so you can do custom scripts. Maybe that means you're investing in a different tool that you want to incorporate, like something like SolarWinds, you want to incorporate APIs from your backup environment. Being able to make all of these things tie together so that you can be ready for everything that's going on.
So
Also,
let's talk about APIs and stuff. We're
sure.
getting kind of like so again we're talking about connecting different systems together
Mhm.
through kind of like a common kind of interface, and then from there we can do some specialized tasks. Is that
Exactly. It's a
okay?
great way for vendors to talk to each other, even if they're not the same thing. Like, how do I get my storage vendor and my hypervisor vendors to talk to each other? I use APIs. So having more robust APIs means I have a lot more things or control I can execute and automate it and avoid human error. And you can test all of it as well so that you know that it works. And then as software changes over time, you would also update your API calls to reflect what those new needs would be. It's really, really key.
So you talk through the 3-2-1-1-0. So my brief overview of what this is and why it's important.
Yeah, this is the bread and butter of everything that Veeam has done and the backup industry as a whole needs to rely upon. The 3-2-1 world, that what is that? That's three different copies of data on two different media types. So that could be spinning disk or object and or tape, right? Different media types. But at least one copy of that should be offsite somewhere. Also, we've added the 1-0 fairly recently to the moniker here because it's also going to make sure that you're going to account for new requirements within secure and security designed infrastructure. Air gapped or immutable or both immutable backup copies so that they cannot be encrypted and changed, and that you can have zero errors for every restore operation. So you need to make sure that if the restores don't work, what good is your backup?
Kind
It,
of
exactly.
part of
So,
the ball game, right?
yeah, if you and so everything that Veeam does is focused on that specific thing. Speed to recovery is paramount. And we need to do all of these things to ensure that I have a fully resilient data practice in my business.
Yeah. So big picture, this is considered kind of holy grail
Hmm.
of kind of backup strategy, and vast majority of businesses are doing probably a what 3-2-1. Is
Yeah,
that fair?
absolutely. And some of these things are going to be application dependent too, right? That's kind of goes back to our run book and backup strategy things previously. Different applications have different requirements. Having something in like a mortgage that's 30 years old is going to have legal requirements to be retained on that data too. So I need to make sure that I have different things. If I have a 30-year mortgage file that I have to keep for 20 years due to SEC or federal government regulations, then maybe I don't want to keep that on flash. Maybe I want to put that on tape or archive object. And then it's always there, you know it's available, but you don't have to spend a lot of money to be ready to restore and read from it at any specific moment in time as an emergency. Very rarely would you have to do something like that.
Yeah. All right. Let's dive into best practice number 3. We're talking about proactive security measures.
Yeah, this is really, really important as well. We've seen that cyber insurance example. Let me define it, I guess, a little bit here is what can I do to prevent risk now that would be expose me to some event in the future? And so this is a very broad spectrum of different things that you can do. Some of them are basic and everybody does them. For example, encryption, role-based access control. I'm not going to give the marketing team administrative access to my storage device, right? I need somebody who actually understands what this stuff does, right? And so you're putting these types of measures in place. More recently, you're seeing a lot more sophistication in vectors of attack. So you want the ability to do inline scanning, right? I want the ability to apply zero trust infrastructure pieces of how things. I know that the architecture is designed in such a way that in the event of a breach, I know how to handle it. I know exactly what to do. And I know that because I've done things ahead of time. I'm prepared to execute my failover plan.
Yeah, one of the things we see a lot of companies starting to invest in kind of real-time monitoring on the security side. I think that's
100%.
been a kind of like a gap that, especially since the pandemic, there's been a lot of companies that kind of relied on kind of older kind of architecture strategies
Mhm.
and haven't really implemented real-time monitoring. And
Yep,
I think that's basically, from my perspective at this point, it's kind of like cost of doing business at this point,
it
because
is.
the attacks are never going to stop. It's really about like how can I go ahead and recognize in real time that there is an infection or a compromise, and I want to block it as soon as possible before it has a chance to go ahead and do something larger. Because it's like the hacker just needs to get access, and then they go ahead. What do? Right? They try and move into other accounts. They try to elevate and escalate their privileges.
Mhm.
And once they get to a kind of administrator level, kind of along the lines of what you were talking about earlier, at that point they have kind of carte blanche, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
We want to just kind of prevent that, and real-time monitoring and alerting is really that
Absolutely.
protection right
A
now.
great example of this, right? What's the signature that you would expect in a ransomware encryption event? You would expect that if my normal rate of change on this application is about 5% change of new data writes every day, right? If I'm seeing something getting encrypted and all of a sudden my 5% is now showing 90% of brand new data, that can absolutely fit an encryption attack profile. So I want to alert for that type of thing, and I want to have proactive reactions to know how to mitigate it before it gets any further, right? So I'm looking for that particular signature, and then I know what to do. This is my second favorite slide in this deck because it's the idea here is to make it so that your security and your protections are in place and so good that people are going to move on to the next one. It may look like you're an ordinary bunny here for your Monty Python fans, but we all know that bunny's killer, right? So let the knights run away and go to a different victim, not you.
Early detection, like along the lines of what we're talking about, that real-time monitoring. One of
Mhm.
the areas that we're seeing a lot of gaps for businesses is around cloud applications. So since the pandemic, there's been a large adoption of cloud systems, Office
Mhm.
365, Google, Amazon Web Services, et cetera. But a lot
Mhm.
of companies are not monitoring those systems, and they contain a lot of confidential information.
Right.
So again, having that visibility into those kinds of systems is also super important, I think.
Absolutely. And a CEO or a CIO is just as e possible to click and infect something with a ransomware virus as the frontline employees are.
For sure.
Everybody here is human. So let's take as much human risk out of it by being able to leverage zero trust architecture designs, automation and orchestration, great run books so that I can have a caveman do it, right? And I know
Yeah.
who's in charge and what their responsibilities are for each phase of a disaster.
So also talk through zero trust a little bit. So folks may not be familiar with that term. So
Yep.
if you think about how remote workers typically function, so they're going to oftentimes they would use some like VPN. Most people have heard that term. They
Mhm.
use that to go ahead and access corporate resources. That VPN is at this point pretty much kind of older tech, and that's largely been supplanted and replaced by zero trust. So zero trust is kind of like the new architecture of how companies can securely access, or remote workers can securely access corporate data. And that really, I think, kind of helps people,
Yeah.
again, better protect their infrastructure and data.
A great summary of what you just said, Rob, and that is so accurate and so important. A good that I found resonates well is to think of it as um, I need to assume that a breach has happened at any step in my infrastructure in application design. If I always have that zero trust mentality and always assume that a breach is possible, I will architect everything according to principles to mitigate that breach from spreading.
Yeah. All right, so we're getting close to time, so we're going to speed up a little bit here. So let's talk about number 4, investing in threat detection tools.
To sum it up real quick, everything here is important. What am I doing to make sure that I have the right tools and the right layers in place for security, right? You can't just rely on one thing. You can't rely just on immutability or on encryption or role-based access. You need the ability to also do things on top of those. Real-time monitoring is one of them, proactive scanning and checking. And while we do offer API as a part of all of our solution suite, there are also other tools that are designed to do just this. And businesses need to invest more into proactively protecting their data, their infrastructure, and their business.
So let's talk through about, we mentioned some of the growing complexity. So what's been the impact on what should businesses be thinking about?
Cyber insurance companies are often refusing to pay out on their policies if you don't have some of these things in place. Immutability is not in place, they won't give you a policy, or they'll say you didn't reach peer standards. And you can see that the outcome of that decision here. 1 in 4 organizations that did pay the ransom never get their data back. How many people do you think in the ransomware world are testing that their backups, the encryption decryption key will actually work and they can recover their data? They're not going to do any type of validation that that works. They don't care. They already got the money. So what's the incentive for them to not just make it doesn't work? You paid them, go away. They got what they wanted.
They're unscrupulous to begin with, right?
Yeah, and it's getting more and more sophisticated every year. The ransomware data trends report that we publish every year has a very, very deep dive into this piece and will awesome to help with.
So best practice number 5, talking through security awareness training. Let's talk through that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. This is also very important. We touched on this briefly. The CEO and CIO are just as capable of infecting a machine with ransomware as anybody else. You need to teach people what to do and how to be security conscious. You need to be able to test their knowledge by doing a phishing scam that's internal and testing, right? Not real phishing. How many of your employees would recognize it? How many of them are actually hitting, yeah, hey, I found it, submit, bring it up to me. And then you can go back and look to see what education pieces you have. You have to avoid the Steve Urkel piece here. You can't say, oh, I'm sorry, I did that poorly. My bad. Because the
Yep.
ramifications of a Steve Urkel move here are worst case scenario, you go out of business.
Yep. All right, so let's talk through some next steps. So I'm going to pop a link in the chat here, and this basically is going to, for attendees, if you want to get, our point here is not to kind of leave you in stress here. The point is here, like, how can we protect ourselves? Hey, in order to protect your stuff, you have to be aware of it first. So it kind of starts from a position of awareness,
Mhm.
and having an assessment done really kind of provides a good brushstroke of what your current level of exposure and vulnerability is. And then from there, you can go ahead and start prioritizing protections and so forth.
Right. And
So it's a good,
I've
yeah,
worked with the ITS team here for years now, and I'll tell you, they're fantastic at this. They are so good at doing the deep dives, understanding the technologies on a complete holistic view of your infrastructure. They're absolutely worth talking to about that type of an audit and review.
all right, I'll go ahead and pop this link in the chat there for everybody. So let's talk through some questions because we've gotten a couple have come in since we've been talking here. So first one, so how quickly should we be able to recover critical systems after a data loss or breach? So I think maybe this kind of goes back to what some of the earlier conversation that we
Yeah.
had, Jim.
Yeah, it depends on the application, right? It depends on the business need. Everything should be defined to meet what that specific workload is. Your crown jewels will need more resources to protect than maybe your file share server or your archive server, right? So
Hmm.
it's always application specific. And so you want to make sure that you're talking to the people who understand and can guide you along if you're not sure what those settings should be for different applications designs.
Yeah. Yeah, here's like a common one that we get once in a while is like if I'm using cloud storage like OneDrive or Google Drive, do I still need backups?
Yes, absolutely. And OneDrive, Azure, Google, they have it very clearly stated in their website. We are not responsible for your data. You are. Some of the art hardware infrastructure protection things that they have in place to meet their SLA of infrastructure uptime will include some data protection there, but you can't rely on it. And because Microsoft's not going to be responsible for that kind of thing within Azure if you're doing it. You are always responsible for your data and you need to protect it.
Yeah, I think in Microsoft's case, if you have like an email or a file in OneDrive and that gets deleted,
Hmm.
we can go back 30 days, basically. I can recover about 30 days. But if it's
Yeah.
beyond that, it's pretty much gone. So that's where a lot of companies will have to use some sort of like third-party cloud backup in order to kind of supplement that and provide more history.
Yeah. And
Uh,
what happens when you don't discover your ransomware attack that happened 6 months ago and you need to go back and figure out the root cause? How did the breach happen? Well, you better make sure you have a ability to look through your audit logs because
yeah,
Microsoft's not going to keep them that long. It's your responsibility to keep things there.
yeah. Next question. How do I know if our current cybersecurity approach is good enough?
That's a great question. So thank you for whoever asked that. I think it's important to recognize that good enough is not an answer that you should be focusing on. I don't think that that's the right strategy. You need the right strategy that meets the needs of your business, not the bare minimum. Bare minimum for a checkbox is never the right answer because it feels more like you're looking for one magic bullet to check a box, but you can't survive that way. You have to be multifaceted and it has to be tailored to your business.
Makes sense. Another question. Should companies include the possibility of paying ransomware in their contingency plans if all defenses and backups fail?
From a practical point of view, I think it's wise to be prepared for all situations. The best strategy would be to prevent that from happening. Using immutable backups, I can restore from my most recent version of data, even if it is infected, by putting it into a safe state, not in reinfecting the network, and then scrubbing it all out, right? You want to be able to retain and recover as quickly as possible from as close a period of time as possible. And that will really make a huge difference in your reaction to ransomware. Hopefully, you guys have that in place so you don't have to go try and pay that ransom. Occasionally, that's something that's going to happen. And we do have help in that area as well. Veeam specifically offers made an acquisition for a company called Coveware that focuses entirely on these types of things. And it would be really awesome, I think, to talk to them. They are phenomenal at what they do, and they broker and work. Think of them kind of like the negotiator between ransom attacks and an end user, and having them on retainer to be able to help you at a moment's notice. It's a great way to look at that. And I know that ITS is very competent at helping follow all of those types of recovery options that would help you not have to pay that ransom in the first place.
Yeah. One other question. Can you send out 3 to 5 questions to set up discovery? Maybe Dave, if you can ask a little bit. I just want to get a little bit more context about the question. Maybe you can add that a little bit. I just want to make sure I'm fully understanding what you're asking. Give him a minute to respond to that, and then see if we have any other questions that come in. Let's see here. One other one that kind of came in. So can you describe what an ideal incident response plan includes? We talked a little bit about that before. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. So
contact information for most important, vendor partners, legal insurance, legal, cyber liability insurance, IT providers, FBI, local FBI offices. If you have a large ransomware event, you want to be considering talking to the FBI. Part of the reason of that is that sometimes they actually have an inventory of decryption keys. So it's depending on what ransomware gang has infected your stuff. They might actually have keys available for that particular ransomware gang. And that might save you the process of having to go through a
yeah,
whole encryption, decryption process.
another great consideration there, Rob, that you triggered for me in my head. You have to take into account that if law enforcement's involved, which they should be because it's criminal, that there's risk there that your assets that they need for investigation, you don't have access to for a while. So you need the ability to have that plan accounted for in the event of a breach, and I can't get access to my hardware software because of legal investigation. What's my DR plan for that?
Yep. All right. Still waiting on Dave, so I'm not quite sure the question a bit. So Dave, I'll give you another 30 seconds or a minute to go ahead and respond. I want to make sure we get your question asked there. Okay, offline, no worries. Yeah, happy to follow up offline with you, David. No worries at all on that. Appreciate that. Give it another 30 seconds if anybody wants to ask any other questions. Otherwise, Jim, I want to thank you for the time and, really appreciate the information that's been shared. Great information here that I think goes a long way to helping companies better protect themselves and make sure that they can avoid these worst case scenarios. So appreciate your time. Thanks
Thank you.
everybody for attending. We'll see you on the next one. We're going to have another one coming up August 14th, and it's basically the importance of protecting cloud systems. So invitations will be going out for that shortly later this week, and we hope to see you at the next one. And thanks a lot, Jim. We'll catch up next time.
My pleasure. We'll talk soon.
All right, take care.